In the wilderness of Oregon, Expedition Bigfoot set out to find answers. But what they captured instead may have been something else entirely. When Bryce Johnson's crew sent a drone into an abandoned mine, it vanished without warning. Moments later, the footage revealed something alive in the darkness. From dying equipment to hair samples and a humanoid figure caught on film, what began as a scientific search for proof turned into a chilling descent into the unknown. Make sure you're subscribed, because what Bryce's team saw that day will leave you questioning what's really hiding out there. The Oregon wilderness has always been a magnet for the strange. Endless forests, deep valleys, and old mining trails cut through the mountains like veins from another time. For the Expedition Bigfoot team, it was the perfect place to search for answers. But on this trip, Bryce Johnson wasn't just following legends, he was chasing data. Weeks of thermal hits, mysterious footprints, and infrasound readings had led them to one location, a sealed, half-collapsed mine shaft hidden beneath a ridge of red rock. No one knew who built it, and no official map even listed it. To the locals, it was simply called the Hollow, and according to them, strange things lived inside. The entrance was small and unstable, impossible for a person to enter safely. "That's a no-go," Bryce said, peering into the pitch-black opening. But his tone wasn't defeat, it was challenge. If they couldn't go in, they'd send something that could. The team had brought along a specialized drone, a carbon fiber crawler built for confined spaces, equipped with thermal imaging, high-lumen floodlights, and real-time telemetry. It was designed to withstand dust, pressure, and electromagnetic interference. On paper, it was unstoppable. As the drone lifted off and hovered before the entrance, everyone fell silent. The signal held steady. Crisp image, clear audio. Slowly, it glided forward into the black, the light from its LEDs carving a tunnel through the darkness. The rock walls closed in tighter the deeper it went. 50 feet, 75, 100. Then, without warning, the video feed cut to static. "Telemetry's gone," the pilot said, confused. "No data return. No fail-safe ping." Bryce frowned. That wasn't possible. The drone's signal could transmit through solid stone. Even if the video dropped, they should still have positional data. But everything was gone. Not a flicker, not a trace. The crew stared at the blank screen, waiting for the signal to reappear. "That's not terrain interference," the pilot muttered. "That's suppression." The forest around them had gone eerily quiet. No birds, no wind, nothing. Bryce glanced back at the mine and said, almost to himself, "Whatever's down there, it just shut us out." The loss of the drone's signal hit the Expedition Bigfoot team harder than they expected. Drones don't just die mid-air. Not at that distance, not with that equipment. The pilot, a seasoned professional with thousands of flight hours, stared at her monitor in disbelief. "I would have had warning signs," she said. "Battery failure, overheating, something. But that was instantaneous, like it hit a wall." Her voice was uneasy, edged with something that wasn't technical frustration. It was fear. Bryce Johnson and the rest of the crew regrouped, analyzing the telemetry logs line by line. There were no signs of malfunction, no power drain, no environmental trigger. The connection didn't fade. It was cut. "That's interference," Russell Accord muttered, pacing near the ridge. "But from what?" Maria Mayer checked the local magnetic readings. They were fluctuating wildly, rising and dropping in impossible intervals, enough to distort any nearby electronics. Yet, there was no natural source in the area that could produce that kind of disturbance. With no other explanation, the team decided to move across the ridge. Their theory was that the mine tunnel might extend beneath it, possibly connecting to another hidden entrance. If the drone had traveled deep enough, maybe they could re-establish the signal from the opposite side. The trek wasn't easy. The ground was uneven, littered with old timbers and rusted machinery, relics from Oregon's forgotten mining days. The further they went, the quieter the world seemed to become. Even the crunch of their boots felt swallowed by the woods. When they reached the far side, the pilot powered the drone back on. At first, nothing happened. Then a single bar of signal appeared. Slowly, the video feed flickered to life, distorted but visible. "I've got something," she whispered. On screen, the tunnel stretched ahead, ahead, branching in two directions. One path followed the mine's original design, carved by hand and reinforced with decaying supports. The other veered off west, uncharted, smoother, and unnaturally symmetrical. "That's not a mine shaft," Tenny said quietly. "That's something else." The pilot tilted the drone toward the new passage. The feed stabilized just long enough for them to glimpse what looked like fine, dust-covered prints pressed into the tunnel floor. Long, human-like impressions, stretching deep into the dark. Then, once again, the signal dropped to black. This time, Bryce didn't speak. He just stared at the mine entrance, his voice low when he finally said, "Something doesn't want us seeing what's in there." When the signal finally returned minutes later, the image that flickered onto the monitor didn't look like any mine footage they'd ever seen. Instead of barren rock and debris, the tunnel floor was covered in green. Thick patches of moss and leafy vines carpeted the passageway, glistening under the drone's infrared lights. "That's impossible," Maria whispered. They were hundreds of feet underground. No sunlight, no water flow, no visible life source. And yet, the vegetation appeared alive, fresh, vibrant. The pilot zoomed closer, and the high-definition lens caught fine particles floating in the air, almost like pollen drifting in slow motion. The deeper the drone ventured, the stranger it became. The walls of the tunnel glistened with moisture, and embedded in the stone were small fragments that reflected light like glass. The sensors picked up humidity levels inconsistent with the environment, warm pockets surrounded by freezing air. "Those are heat blooms," Bryce said, "like something's radiating energy in waves." Maria leaned closer to the screen. "Or body heat." That's when they saw it. Claw marks. Dozens of them, long and jagged, etched into the rock face about 8 feet off the ground. They weren't random scratches. They were patterned, deliberate. "Something was bracing itself here," Russell said quietly. "Something tall." The pilot steadied the drone, switching to thermal vision. The moment she did, the screen exploded in static. For a brief second, the feed showed a massive red flare at the far end of the tunnel, a shape standing upright, radiating over 100 degrees Fahrenheit against the cold background. "Do you see that?" Maria gasped. The pilot nodded, trying to lock focus. "It's moving." But before she could stabilize the feed, the image warped. The shape split into 2, then 3, flickering like a glitch. The tunnel's audio filled with a deep rhythmic vibration, not mechanical, not human. The pilot's controls went unresponsive as the drone jerked left, then right. "I'm losing her," she said. "I can't control it." And then, blackout. The screen went dark, the telemetry flatlined, and every monitor in their setup flickered with the same image. A single frame of static, with what looked like 2 faint circular reflections glowing in the center. Eyes. For the first time all night, Bryce Johnson didn't say a word. He simply took off his headset, stared into the forest surrounding them, and whispered, "We just saw it. And it saw us, too." The team sat in silence for nearly a minute, staring at the black monitor, the forest wind whistling faintly through the trees. The pilot's hands shook slightly as she tried rebooting the drone system. "It's gone again," she said. "No signal, no power return. It's like it never existed." Bryce leaned forward, scanning the equipment. "We're not done yet," he muttered. "We've already seen something move down there. We're going back in." The pilot hesitated, warning him that another run could destroy the entire system. But Bryce insisted. After a tense pause, she powered it up again. This time, they launched manually, flying at lower altitude to avoid signal disruption. The drone's lights pierced through the mine's entrance once more, but the passage looked different now. The same rocks and debris were there, yet the air shimmered faintly, like heat distortion. Maria checked her readings. "Magnetic flux just spiked," she said. "Something's active in there." As the drone drifted deeper, faint metallic sounds began echoing through the microphone. Slow, rhythmic, like footsteps scraping against the stone. "You hearing that?" Russell asked, his voice low. Everyone nodded. The pilot swung the camera toward the sound. Nothing. Just shadows. Then, from the far end of the tunnel, a flicker. Something tall moving left to right across the frame. "Freeze it," Bryce said. The pilot paused the feed and rewound. The silhouette appeared for less than a second. Broad shoulders, elongated arms, walking upright. But it wasn't its shape that terrified them. It was the reflection of light off what looked like wet skin. "That's not fur," Maria said quietly. "It's flesh." Seconds later, the drone's sensors registered a sudden temperature surge. surge, nearly 115 degrees Fahrenheit. The walls trembled, dust fell from the ceiling, and a deep, guttural growl reverberated through the speakers. "That's vocal," Russell said, eyes wide. "That's a response." Before anyone could react, the camera jolted sideways, spinning uncontrollably. "It's moving!" the pilot shouted. "Something's near it!" The feed showed a blur of motion, flashes of stone, streaks of red, a glimpse of something reaching toward the lens. And then, once again, total darkness. Only one sound remained, a slow, heavy exhale echoing through the speakers, followed by what everyone swore were footsteps retreating into the depths of the mine. When the feed finally cut out, Bryce exhaled shakily. "It's aware of us," he said. "It's guarding something in there." When dawn broke over the Oregon Ridge, the forest looked calm, but no one on the Expedition Bigfoot crew felt that way. The team had spent the night replaying every second of drone footage, frame by frame. What they found left more questions than answers. The final seconds before the blackout revealed a faint outline behind the glare of the lights, a humanoid figure crouched near the rock wall, its head turning directly toward the camera right before the signal died. The image was blurry, but its proportions were unmistakable. At least 7 feet tall, long-limbed and broad-shouldered. "It's watching us," Bryce said. "It's intelligent." But intelligence wasn't the only concern. The drone's flight log showed something alarming. A sudden gravitational anomaly, a reading so high it couldn't be explained by natural causes. "That's not interference," Maria said, pointing to the numbers. "That's distortion." She cross-referenced the readings with the area's geological survey. There were no magnetic fields strong enough to produce the effects they recorded. "Something in there is generating power," she concluded, "and not from anything human." Russell Accord, a man who had spent years in the field tracking wildlife, had a different theory. "It's not about the mine," he said quietly. "It's about what's using it." He motioned toward the western slope, where the vegetation was still thick and untouched. The ground near the entrance showed no human footprints, only deep impressions, heavy and widely spaced, almost like something had walked upright but shifted its weight differently than a person would. The group collected samples from the entrance, hair strands clinging to a timber beam, a fragment of organic material, and a strange crystalline dust coating the stones. The lab later confirmed that the hair contained both human and unknown primate DNA markers. That alone could have been a breakthrough, but the crystalline residue was stranger still. Under magnification, it emitted faint light, a form of bioluminescence. That night, Bryce sat alone reviewing the footage again. Every rational part of him wanted to dismiss it. Glitch, reflection, artifact. But then he reached the final frame again. The blurred face turning toward the drone, 2 faint eyeshine reflections staring straight into the lens. And beneath the static, hidden in the final millisecond of audio, something else. A whispering tone that didn't sound mechanical at all. It almost sounded like breathing. As the sun disappeared behind the tree line, the team prepared for another night near the ridge. None of them said it aloud, but the atmosphere had shifted. The excitement of discovery had turned into a creeping sense of being watched. Bryce sat by the monitors, scanning the forest line as the pilot recalibrated the equipment. "We're not leaving until we know what's down there," he said, voice low but firm. Maria had set up new magnetic field sensors around the perimeter, small black boxes that emitted faint chirps whenever anomalies occurred. Within an hour, the chirping began, steady, rhythmic, and growing stronger near the mine entrance. "That's active interference," she said, eyebrows furrowed. "But it's not random. It's pulsing, almost patterned." Russell decided to sweep the outer area with a thermal scope. He scanned the hillside, slow and deliberate, until the screen flickered. "Got something," he said sharply. The shape appeared just beyond the tree line, tall, upright, and warm against the cold forest backdrop. It was still, watching. "It's not an animal," he muttered. "It's holding position." Bryce joined him, eyes fixed on the screen. The figure didn't move for nearly 30 seconds. Then, just as suddenly, it shifted, taking 3 long steps sideways before vanishing behind a boulder. Maria rushed over with her camera. "Did you record it?" Russell nodded. "Yeah, but it's like it knew exactly when to move, almost like it was waiting for us to look away. Minutes later, one of the outer motion sensors triggered, a low alert tone echoing through the camp. Something had tripped the wire perimeter. The crew froze. "It's close," the pilot whispered. They trained their flashlights toward the mine, the beams slicing through mist and dust. For a moment, nothing moved. Then a low, guttural noise echoed from inside the tunnel. It wasn't a growl or a roar. It was something stranger, almost like a deep exhale mixed with speech. "Back up," Bryce said, his voice steady but tense. He knew they were being warned. The mine wasn't abandoned. It was occupied. As the sound faded, Maria looked at him. "We're not supposed to be here," she said quietly. Bryce nodded. "Maybe not," he replied, "but whatever's down there knows we are." That night, none of them slept. The forest stayed alive with noises, distant movement, faint tapping, and a single, unmistakable sound that replayed in everyone's mind. Slow, heavy breathing coming from deep within the mine. The next morning, the team looked exhausted. No one had slept, and the forest that had once felt alive now felt like it was holding its breath. The wind was still, the birds were gone, and a thick fog had rolled in overnight, clinging to the trees like a curtain. "We're getting one more look," Bryce said, determination in his tone. "We'll pull the thermal rig to the ridge and scan from above. If it's still here, we'll see it." They hiked up the incline, equipment strapped tight, moving carefully across the loose stone and moss. From the top, the valley below stretched like an endless green ocean, quiet, motionless. The mine entrance was barely visible through the fog, just a black scar in the earth. Maria set up her heat scope again, calibrating it for long-range detection. As the screen came to life, she froze. "Bryce," she said, "you're going to want to see this." The display showed multiple heat signatures moving in formation. "Not random, not wildlife. There's more than one," Russell said, leaning in. "Three. No, 4. They're walking side by side." The group watched as the figures appeared and disappeared behind the mist, their movements deliberate, controlled, and unnervingly human-like. "That's not a herd," Maria whispered. "That's a patrol." Bryce's expression hardened. "They're circling the ridge," he said. "They know where we are." The team quickly switched to infrared, confirming the same shapes now closing in from the tree line. The pilot turned on the drone camera once more, desperate for visual confirmation, but the signal distorted instantly. The static wasn't random. It pulsed rhythmically, almost like it was mimicking the earlier magnetic interference. "It's copying our equipment," she said, realization dawning in her voice. "It's learning how to jam us." The air pressure dropped. Everyone felt it, a sudden, crushing weight on their chests. Then, from the trees below, came the same sound they'd heard the night before, a low, guttural exhale that echoed across the valley. Only this time, it wasn't distant. It was close, too close. Russell raised his flashlight and caught a glimpse of movement, a massive figure slipping between the trees, tall as a doorframe, moving with unnatural speed. "There!" he shouted, but before anyone could respond, the motion sensors around the mine erupted in a chorus of alarms. Something was advancing from every direction. The hunters had just become the hunted. Panic set in as the forest came alive around them. The mine's motion sensors screamed in unison, their red lights flashing through the fog. "They're closing in!" Maria yelled. Bryce shouted for the team to form up, but every direction looked the same. Gray mist, twisting shadows, and movement they couldn't quite track. The drone operator managed to bring the camera feed back online for just a second before it froze on an image no one forgot. A towering figure, blurred but upright, its head tilting slowly toward the lens, as if watching them watch it. Then, the signal died again. Russell raised his rifle, scanning the tree line. "Something's pacing us," he said. They could all hear it. Footsteps, heavy but deliberate, circling, testing. "It's not an animal," Maria whispered. "It's thinking." That realization struck harder than fear ever could. The group retreated to the trucks, half expecting something to break from the trees. But the forest never gave them that satisfaction. It only watched. By the time they reached base camp, dawn was bleeding through the fog. They packed in silence, the air still thick with tension. When Bryce finally spoke, his voice was low, heavy. "It didn't want us to prove it exists," he said. "It wanted to make sure we never come back." Later, when they reviewed the salvaged footage, something eerie surfaced in the final second. Audio distortion that, when slowed down, wasn't static at all. It was breathing, slow, rhythmic, intelligent. Bryce shut off the monitor. No one said a word. Weeks later, Discovery filed the Oregon footage under classified review. No public statement, no follow-up episode, just silence. Bryce later admitted, "We went looking for proof of Bigfoot, but maybe it wasn't Bigfoot looking back. Whatever it was, it had learned, it had watched, and somewhere in those mountains, beneath the fog and the ruins of that mine, something still waits. Patient, intelligent, and guarding the truth the Expedition Bigfoot team was never supposed to find."